Hello everyone, and welcome to the Prince Magnum channel where hot rodding and romance do coexist. I'm your host, Prince Magnum. Welcome to Do-It-Yourself Budget Hot Rodding, Lady Mavericks Unite. In today's episode, for you Lady Mavericks out there, we're going to talk about engine coolant. But before we dive into that, we need to discuss a little bit about today's topic before we just start talking about engine coolant. The first thing that we need to discuss is there are going to be pretty much two types of engines in the world. There's going to be air-cooled and liquid-cooled. Now, why do we need to worry about how they're cooled? Well, through internal combustion, pistons, pistons going up and down, friction being created, actual combustion happening inside of your engine, different parts moving around, heat is generated by your engine. Now, some of this is dissipated through engine oil, but that's not enough, okay? You need a way to cool that engine down because if enough heat builds up, you have a catastrophic failure. Parts will break, heads will warp, crack, your engine is no good anymore. It's just the nature of heat, okay? So we have to have a way to lower that heat to where that doesn't happen. And this is where your two types of engines come in. You have an air-cooled engine and you have a liquid-cooled engine. Now, most of the time, you ladies are going to have vehicles that are liquid-cooled. And this is where coolant comes in. Now, coolant does two different jobs. Besides the obvious of cooling your engine down, it also provides heat to your vehicle. I know, wait a minute, huh? Okay, we're going to kind of explain a little bit of this, and we're going to even have a few visual aids to even work with because we're going to go out and work on Project Lena, and I'll be able to kind of help you along as we're doing the work. But before we dive into that, we need to talk about the coolant itself, and that is going to require a couple of visual aids. Okay, the first type of coolant that we need to talk about that's out of the gate, and it's kind of one you really don't see used as much as you used to, and that's the old green stuff. And this is basically the SuperTech, coolant that you can get from your local Walmart and places like that. This is the green stuff, okay? And this is what guys like me are going to be super familiar with. Pretty much it was used in all the cars back in the day. This is the one that when you hear about in like your murder mysteries and things like that, well, they were poisoned with antifreeze. This is the stuff they're talking about. Has a kind of a sweet smell to it, and from what I understand, it does actually have a slight sweet taste to it, which is why you have to keep it away from pets. So be very careful with this stuff. But this is the stuff that cars like Project Spirit would have been more familiar with. But today's modern cars usually use coolant that's specifically for that car company. As a matter of fact, Project Lena is no exception to that rule. This is Dexcool, okay? This is the coolant that Project Lena uses. Now, be sure to check, with the auto parts place where you're buying it, what coolant is specific for your vehicle. And they'll tell you pretty much right out of the gate, okay? They'll tell you, and you'll be able to get the one that's specifically for your vehicle. Now, again, with the older ones, the green stuff worked just fine. And I know that there are some mechanics out there that will tell you that you can still use the green stuff in modern cars, but I don't suggest it. Because with modern cars, like I said earlier, they're specifically designed for specific coolants now. And they don't run at the optimal temperature that they're supposed to. They oftentimes run a little bit hotter. And we're talking aluminum, engine blocks, aluminum heads. You see where this is going. You could have a catastrophic failure. And never mix the coolants together. Some places will do that, and it causes all sorts of havoc on the engine. It causes the foam up. Don't do that, okay? Stay with what the manufacturer recommends. This is one of those times I'll even tell you, the manufacturer, if they did it that way, they did it that way for a reason. Stay with it, okay? Now, let's talk about the economics very quickly for coolant. When I talk about engine coolant and I talk about economics, you'll hear me say buy the concentrate, okay? And again, this is for Project Spirit. And a jug of this, a jug of what they call the premix, which this is kind of the, this is an empty jug, but this is the premix. It'll say 50-50 pre-diluted antifreeze / coolant, okay? That's the premix. Well, the 50-50 mix, okay? And with the 50-50 mix, you might pay, well, from your local Walmart where I live, you'll pay about $10 to $11 for something like Project Spirit. However, if you buy the concentrate, it's about $14, $15. Why would you buy the concentrate then? Because what you do to get your 50-50 mix, what you do is you take half out of the jug, put it into an empty jug. You take half of it, put it in a jug. The other half is in the other jug. You fill them up with water after that point, and you have your 50-50 coolant mix like you're supposed to have for your engines. So just for a few dollars more and putting in the work yourself, you actually double the amount, okay? Which brings me to, with Project Lena, modern vehicles, do the same thing because we have the concentrate right here for DexCool, which means that for an additional $4, $5, maybe $6 more, which is still almost half the price of what I paid for this, I just doubled the amount of coolant that I have on hand. This is super important. In today's market where money is always tight, even if you're making huge amounts of money, knowing where you can save a few extra dollars on your vehicle, because vehicles are expensive to maintain, knowing where you can save a couple extra dollars is always, always a plus. Now, that brings us to an old one that we used to hear a lot. Just put water in it. How many times have we heard some people do that? Well, if you say live in, say, like Nevada, or maybe even, sunny California, or, the Arizona desert, that might work. But if you live in areas like I do here in Missouri, that's not a good idea. Because with just water inside your engine, the temperature drops. You get temperature changes, and you can actually crack your block. Now, I know they have freeze plugs in it that's supposed to pop out when that happens, but it doesn't always work that way. So use the 50-50 in cold areas like here in Missouri, because when the temperature drops below freezing, that antifreeze, that coolant is designed to go all the way to 30 below in protecting your engine. So that's why I will tell you, if the manufacturer recommends it, you might want to do it. And even if you do live in places like sunny California or the hot Arizona desert, I would still suggest doing it because of the fact that it is recommended by the manufacturer. And you'll even see guys on the drag strip still doing exactly what I just said, going with the recommended coolants, okay, for your vehicle. They will still do it. Some will do the water, but you'll still see a lot of them that will run the proper coolant. So that brings us to the point where now we need to actually go out and do the work. So I'm going to mix up a 50-50 batch of DexCool. We're going to take it out to Project Lena, and then we're going to go ahead and put that in and get her coolant level topped off. All right? All right, folks. Now, I know this is not necessarily the car we're working on today. I wish we were, but we're not. Let me explain really quick. It's going to be a little bit easier to see on Project Spirit than it is going to be on Project Lena. Now, I talked about that that your coolant system also operates your heat system, the heating unit in your vehicle. Well, the way that works is there's going to be some lines that's going to connect somewhere on your engine. In some cases, it's the intake manifold. In Project Spirit's case, on her old inline 6, it connects into the water pump. Now it's going to go it's going to take hot water back to something inside your, to the back of the engine on the wall over here. And it's going to go in through some hoses and connect into something that looks kind of like a radiator. And it'll travel through that that entire, thing that looks like a radiator, what we call the heater core. And there's this little, electric motor that's attached to the wall somewhere in there that's going to blow over that little radiator thing. And it's going to throw hot air inside of your vehicle. That's how it works. And then as it travels through your heater core, it runs back through a return line, back to somewhere on the engine, usually somewhere near the water pump, and then it's circulated back to the radiator in some way, shape, or form. The manufacturers has still continued to use this system today. Why? Because it works, and it's a great way to also help reduce the heat in your engine. So thus, it provides you with the heat you need, and it helps. It does help cooling. And as a matter of fact, there are even some mechanics that say if your temperature gauge starts going up, turn on the heat to help reduce some of the heat. So there's a little bit of tip for you. Now let's actually get over there and start working on Project Lena. Alright folks, we're now at the stage where we can actually start putting coolant into Project Lena. Now this is going to be in 2 stages. The first stage is basically we just put coolant in. That's all you do. That's stage 1. Now a lot of folks at home, what they will do is that's as far as they go. But Project Lena has had a problem where she's leaking antifreeze somewhere, and we're going to have to eventually take her into the shop and figure out where. But in the meantime, there is going to be air that's going to be in the lines because she runs low. I fill her back up, runs low. So what we have to do is bleed the system. Now the way that works is we have to fill up wherever the manufacturer has you put the coolant in, and then we have to start her and run her for a little while. Then that coolant will get circulated through, pushing the air back up to here at some point, or up to the top of the radiator, depending on how your system works. When that happens, that coolant level is going to get low. So then we add more coolant. And we continue to do this till it stops drawing coolant down. That's the second stage. So this is where it gets a little time consuming, but if you don't do it this way, what ends up happening is your engine will draw what's in the radiator, and because you had all this air inside of there, it then pulls it all in, and you've got a low radiator. And then you've got an engine overheating. So take the time, make that time, and top it off right. So we're going to start off, like I said, with one of our jugs of coolant. And we've got 2 to work with, so we've got plenty of coolant to work with. So we're going to add that in right like such. We're going to fill it up to just about the top. Now you may even notice right away that maybe for some odd reason, as you begin topping this off, maybe the water level starts already going down. It starts going in, so that'll actually help you a little bit along the way. So you can give it a moment too, and kind of wait for it and see what it's going to do. Now with pressurized systems, just like Project Lena and just like Project Spirit, you want to replace the cap before you begin, before you start it and everything. But while we're also here, we're also going to take a moment. We're going to check the oil, okay? And make sure, which she's a little bit low. So before we go any further, I'm going to top her off, and which that'll take a second. I'll top her off with the recommended oil that she requires, and then we'll start her up and begin topping off our coolant system as we go. Alright folks, over all the engine noise that's going on right now, this is definitely the time. Get them started, get them running, get them warm. Now, as the coolant level drops off, You're going to add it to the engine while it's still running. You will not hurt the vehicle at all. Okay? The reason why you do that is if you put cold coolant into your engine without it running, you could throw the engine into thermal shock and warp the head, crack the engine, crack the head, something to that effect. That's why we take the time and get this thing up to operating temperature like this. As the thermostat opens up, as the water pump does its job, it'll pump everything through the engine. Engine will come up, continue to come up to the temperature it's supposed to. We take the time, as the air is being pushed out, we add the coolant in while it's still running. Now, Project Lena does have a little difficulty running sitting here at idle, so we're going to have to kind of play with that a little bit, and we may even have to take her around the block a couple of times. Not a big deal. But regardless of the situation, we're taking the time. We're making sure that it's done right. And this is something that car manufacturers have recommended doing for vehicles for many years. So, again, take the time to do this right, from start to finish. If not, you could have an engine still overheat, a catastrophic failure, and that's the last thing any of you ladies out there want to be dealing with. And this takes time. Alright folks, we're now at that stage where we need to add a little bit of coolant back to her. She's running pretty smooth at the moment. Again, Lena's got a lot of issues that were left over from when Princess Faye was driving her. But now's the time. We're going to top her off with a little bit of coolant. I try not to splash it, especially if you got a lot of stray animals in the area, because again, this is poisonous, okay? And matter of fact, we've all heard the stories where people have poisoned animals using antifreeze. So don't, be very careful with this stuff. Now, at this stage of the game, we're going to have to actually take Project Lena around the block a couple of times, work the coolant through. We may even have to put her through her paces. So while she's still running like this, we're going to take her around the block, blow out the cobwebs, come back, we're going to check the coolant level, and then go from there. Alright folks, quick trip around the block, and she's good. We now have good heat coming through. She's running tip-top. Now, again, is all this necessary? Yes. Because if you don't do that, your vehicles don't last. In one of the next episodes, we're going to continue on getting Project Lena a little bit more capable of handling the cold weather. That means dealing with cold weather starts and idling when she comes to a stop. Because right now, there's going to be some video footage that has to be cut because she just doesn't like running when she's sitting in park like this. She's got a lot of issues. Again, we're dealing with a lot of issues that should have been dealt with while Princess Faye was here, but that's not necessarily the case. And you'll find that sometimes when you get cars like Project Lena, they're oftentimes in complete disrepair. So, from here, we're just going to continue forward, making this car run at its peak condition, basically almost like it was brand new all over again. So, it brings us to a great stopping point for this particular video. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to smash that like button. And if you're not subscribed to the Prince Magnum channel, you might want to consider doing so, because we try to provide content like this on a regular. So, for every last one of you out there, before we go into the outro, check out the Patreon, the Patreon account, and you can actually donate to the Prince Magnum channel. Along with that, be sure that if you want your own Prince Magnum channel merchandise, be sure to check out the Teespring store as well. That brings us to the point where I get to say to all of you out there, especially our ladies, get out there and work on a project. I don't care what it is, just do something with yourselves. Remember, idle hands and a creative mind go together like oil and water. If you have a sweetheart, sweep them off their feet and do something special for them today. And as always, for all of you out there, if no one out there has told you that they love you today, Prince Magnum does. God bless you, and have a happy 24. Thank you.
Sayer, 6.22 with an over 116 miles an hour. And right now, good time to go get a hot dog while we wait for Cam.